Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be for everyone who wants to get back into reading or just get into reading in general. So I have accumulated some different book recommendations based on genres, whatever you're feeling like. If you don't normally read and you don't know where to start, these are some recommendations that aren't too hard to get into, books that I have enjoyed and just have read throughout my time as a reader. I've been reading consistently for almost 5 years now, and I've read about 350 books, I think. So I would say I have some street cred to give you book recommendations based on that. I have 4 different genres today, and each genre has 5 books in it. Let's just get started, I guess, and let's talk about a bunch of books if you want to get into reading or back into reading if you've been in a slump. These are just like all easy, fast-paced books. The first genre we have is romance. I feel like romance books are just easy. They're what people usually gravitate towards when they're getting into reading, for the most part. Obviously not everyone, but at least that is what I started with as well. So the first book I have is If It Makes You Happy by Julie Olivia, and I actually read this quite recently, like in the fall, and I really enjoyed it. So I thought I would recommend it because it's just like such a cute, fun, cheesy read, especially during the fall time. So this book takes place in the 90s, so it just gives that nostalgic feeling. Even though I wasn't even alive in the 90s, it still gives just like, you know, like the fun, like the rom-coms you would watch that are from like the 90s or early 2000s. In this book, we have our main character, Michelle, and her mom unfortunately passes away, and her mom owned a bed and breakfast in this small town. Now she's taken over the bed and breakfast, but only temporarily because her sister is supposed to take it over, but she is finishing up her college degree. So Michelle ends up doing it, and next door, a grumpy neighbor lives, and he's a single dad to 2 daughters. And while he's grumpy, he's also really friendly and just wants to help her get settled in with the bed and breakfast because he used to help her mom as well. Sparks fly, they fall in love because he's hot. So, and he lives right next door, and they're both like gravitating towards each other, and it's just a really fun, cute fall book. So obviously right now it's spring, not the best time. You can definitely still read it any time of the year, obviously. So the next book I have is First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. I absolutely loved this book. I read it in one day. I couldn't put it down. I was so obsessed with it. I was also on a road trip, so that probably helped, but it was so good and so cute. We have 2 main characters. One of them is Aiden, and he is the host of a romance hotline. And one night, our other main character, Lucy, her daughter, calls the hotline to get help for her mom. She wants her mom to find a boyfriend or like find love. And that ends up becoming like a whole segue on the show because the clip where Lucy and Aiden talk for the first time goes viral, and people are obsessed with her finding romance. So she ends up going on the show, and it's like a weekly thing, I believe, where she's updating about if she's gone on any dates and like just talks about her dating life and advice. And obviously she ends up falling in love with Aiden, the host, instead of finding someone else. So the perfect just rom-com romance vibes. I could picture this like a movie in my head. And the second one just came out in February, which I believe is about Lucy's best friend, and I've just downloaded it onto my Kindle. I'm very excited to read it. Next up, we have Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter. In this book, we follow Olivia, and she recently moved in with her brother and her brother's best friend. And one day she gets a text from a random number just asking her what she's wearing. And that ends up becoming like a very flirtatious and fun text thread that she has with the number. And one day she realizes that the number she's been texting belongs to her brother's best friend. And his name is Colin, and he also doesn't know who he is texting. So they're both like texting anonymously. I don't remember how it started or like why he sent that text. I assume he got a number from someone else and thought that it was a person that he'd met, but it actually wasn't. I had a great time reading this book. It was perfect. I read it on vacation. Perfect fun vibes. It's not super long, like 300 pages, and the font is pretty big as well. I really enjoyed it. Next romance book is This Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune. In this book, we follow Lucy, who ends up having a one-night stand with some guy that she met on this little island that she went to with her best friend. But she went a day early, I believe, compared to her best friend. And then the next day, she realizes the person she just slept with was her best friend Bridget's brother. And they're both kind of like obsessed with each other now, but she doesn't want anything to do with that because of her best friend's feeling. And every summer where she ends up going back to this place, she tries to keep her distance from him, but it's easier said than done. It's hard to keep their distance because they just have a connection. In the present tense in this book, Bridget, her best friend, is getting married and she's having like a crisis, and she ends up going to that island to kind of escape, and Lucy obviously follows her and tries to figure it out, and she ends up also sparking a romance with the brother, of course, and they finally get together. Fun, cute summer romance. Carly Fortune is the queen of summer books. They all take place during summer and they're just all so fun and perfect and easy to read. Yeah, it's like 360 pages, so again, not super long. Definitely something you could read fairly quickly. And the last romance book I do not own physically, but it is The Love Haters by Catherine Center. Here we follow Katie, who is a video producer, and she believes that she's about to get fired, but then her boss is like, you should go to this little city or island, I don't remember which, and make a video about this hero who is a Coast Guard, and his name is Hutch. What she doesn't know is that Hutch is actually her boss's brother, and they don't get along, so that's a bit awkward. And because she doesn't want to get fired, she takes the job even though she's lying to get it, because she had to be able to swim and she doesn't know how to. So obviously Hutch has to teach her how to swim. She ends up like renting this little beach vacation home from his aunt randomly, and it's just like the cutest little town, and I thought it was so funny and I really enjoyed the book and seeing them fall in love. And there's also just like a lot of other things and some drama going on where you're like, what is going on? And Hutch has a really cute dog as well, so just perfect romance vibes. Next up, we move into the thriller genre, and I actually only own one of them physically. So the first book in the genre is The Inmate by Frida McFadden. This book I recommended to so many people. I love it so much, and one day I might reread it. I read it, I believe, in 2024. Yeah, like 2 years ago I read it. I read it all in one day, and I believe I worked for like 10 hours that day, and I still read it because I could not put it down. I could not go to sleep until I had finished it. I was so obsessed with it. In the book we follow our main character Brooke, who is a like prison nurse, and she recently just moved back to her like hometown, and she gets a new job at the local prison. But what no one else knows is that she actually knows one of the inmates, and she's the reason he's even in prison because of her testimony, because he allegedly murdered a bunch of her friends during like a sleepover party thing at his house, I think. And all of a sudden in the book she starts questioning herself, like, did he even do it? Or did this other guy who still lives in town do it? And I was feeling so gaslit the whole book. Like, did he actually do it? Like, is he wrongfully in prison, or does he belong there and he's just like a psychopath who's gaslighting her? Or did this other guy who's also really creepy do it? And it's just like a mindfuck, and I did not guess the plot twist at all, and I was just shook and like out of my mind. Like, it was insane, and Frida McFadden's best book in my opinion. So good. But honestly, I would recommend mostly any book by her. They're all so fun and so easy to get through. Like, you can read them in one day if you wanted to. Next up, I have a YA book called That's Not My Name, and I read this last year and I thought it was so interesting and so good, and not at all what I was expecting. So we're kind of having like dual point of views, and one of them is from this guy who is the boyfriend of a girl who goes missing, and everyone in town believes that he's the one who did it. So he's kind of like getting exiled a little bit, and even the police is questioning him and whatnot. So he tries to find out like what actually happened to his girlfriend. So him and some of her friends start like digging in and figuring out what happened, and they go to another town, like follow the lead there. And then the other point of view we're seeing is a girl who's getting kidnapped by this man who tricks her into thinking that she is his daughter because she has no memory of who she is. She was like in an accident and ends up at the police station, and he comes in and is like, that's my daughter, I can prove to you that that's my daughter, I live right up here, you can come to the house, you can see that everything is fine. And she's just like going along with it because obviously she has no idea whether or not she's his daughter because she doesn't remember it. She doesn't even remember her own name. So very, very interested, and you're like, is that the girlfriend, or like when are they going to figure it out? And it was just crazy, and I really enjoyed it, and I was shook by the end of it, like jaw on the floor. The next thriller book is a little bit more of a scary one, at least in my opinion. I was terrified. I think I finished it around midnight and I was so scared afterwards. It is Final Girls by Riley Sager. And if you don't know what a final girl is, it's basically the last person who's alive in like a murder. Like in a movie or something where all the people go to a house and everyone's getting killed except for one person, then that's the final girl. The one who survives the massacre, if you can call it that. So in this book, we have one of these final girls, and other final girls are starting to get killed, and she's like, what is going on? And she's a little bit scared, obviously. And a lot of crazy things just like happen in the book, and she's freaking out, and she ends up going back to the cabin where all her friends got murdered. And she doesn't even really remember, like she doesn't remember who did it, but she was told that it was someone who escaped from this like psycho ward that was close by. But why are these final girls getting killed? Really weird and really creepy, and I was so scared. And I was also shook by the ending here. Then we have The Last Thing You Told Me by Laura Dave. In this book, the wife Hannah one day gets a letter that says protect her, and her husband Owen is all of a sudden missing, and she's taking this letter as protect her as Owen's 16-year-old daughter Bailey. But Hannah is only the stepmother, and she's only been married to Owen for 1 year, and Bailey doesn't really like her that much. But they kind of have to work together to figure out what is happening. Owen's boss gets arrested by the FBI. So now they're like, okay, Owen is not who he says he is, so who is he? So Bailey and Hannah are trying to like work together to figure out his true identity and what happened and why did he disappear? Like, why did he have to go away? And I actually don't even remember what the ending is. I think I have like a vague memory of it, but I'm not entirely sure because I read this like 3 years ago. But I know that I thought it was really good. The font is really big, so it shouldn't be too hard to get through. It's about 360 pages. Very interesting story, definitely. And just so many twists and turns in this book. The last thriller I have is a YA again, and I didn't even explain this, but if you're new to reading, you might not know what YA is. It means young adults below 18 years old, and the characters are often young, like 16, 17 years old, like in high school. But some YA books are just so fast and like easy to get through, so I still really enjoy them for the most part. But the last one I was talking about is The Fear. There is like a trend going around where everyone at school and just like everyone in town are posting memes or posting things online about their worst fears. And then one day people start getting killed, and the way they get killed is from the worst fear that they shared online. So our main character Izzy tries to figure out who is doing this and trying to stop the murderers, and she never posted her own biggest fear, but I believe that her sister did or something like that. But it was crazy and just like so fast paced and easy to get through, and so many twists and turns, and she has these like different suspects. She's like, is this guy or is this guy? Like, could it be someone that she knows? The next genre I have is fantasy. First I have Powerless, which is a very popular trilogy that came out, I believe, in 2023. The first one came out, and it was self-published by Lauren Roberts. She wrote this book when she was primarily 17 years old, but I still ate this book up. I thought it was so interesting and so good, and if you like Hunger Games, you might like this book as well. In this like universe or world where they live in, there was like a plague or something where people started getting powers, and then there are some people who didn't, and those are called the Ordinary, and they're actually like getting exiled from this land because the power people believe that they'll get infected by the Ordinaries and they'll lose their powers. But our main character Peyton pretends that she has a power. She pretends to be like psychic, and she's really good at it. She's kind of like a profiler. There's like an example where someone has like mud on his knee or something, so she's like, you've just been proposed, like you were down on one knee. And she was right, so people are like, oh, we believe you, like you are psychic. But she's also homeless and an orphan and lives like out on the street, so she steals money and food and whatnot to get by. And one day she tries to steal from the prince, and he's actually like getting mugged or something by someone else, and she ends up saving him. So now everyone like knows kind of who she is, and she gets chosen against her will to be a part of these games called the Purging Trials. So that's where like the Hunger Games part comes into it. So she has to like be a part of these trials that are deadly, like people fight to the death to win this. But it's obviously really hard because she doesn't actually have any powers, so she's obviously scared of getting killed. But she ends up striking an alliance with the prince, and they end up getting feelings for each other, of course. This was just so interesting, and I really enjoyed it. And I also liked the second and the third book in this series. So I would definitely recommend this if you like fantasy and if you like Hunger Games. Next fantasy I have is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Also a very popular fantasy series that currently has 3 books out, and 2 are on the way at some point. We don't know the dates yet, but there are supposed to be 2 more books in this series. In this series, we follow Violet Sorengale, who has been like training her whole life to become, I believe it's called a scribe, like someone who works in the library, and they're very silent and they read and they find information and they know history and all those things. But her mom is a dragon rider, and so is her sister and her older brother. Like a few months before they have to choose their path in life, her mom decides, you have to become a dragon rider. And she's like, how am I supposed to do that? She hasn't trained for that at all, and she's very fragile. I don't remember exactly what it is, like what her disability is, but she has very weak bones, like they can break very easily. And she's quite small, like she's short and just skinny and not the best fighter at all to become a dragon rider. She has no choice, and she ends up getting into the school, obviously, and then she has to bond with a dragon. And it's just crazy. And obviously she's in like this academy school. She's learning how to fight. She's learning how to communicate with the dragons and to fly. Really, really interesting. I loved the first book. I've actually read it twice and I just think it's so good. And I definitely recommend it to anyone getting new into reading. It's like a romantasy. The same with Powerless. It's a fantasy, but there's definitely like a big romance plot in it as well, which is obviously the bad guy that she was told to stay away from. I love this. Next up is a bit of a different kind of fantasy in a way. It's called Bride by Ali Hazelwood. And this is more like think Twilight or something like that, where it's still the real world that we live in right now, but there's just supernatural creatures. So there's werewolves and vampires, and they each like have a territory. So like there's a human territory, the vampires, and the werewolves. And the humans are aware that there are werewolves and vampires, so it's not a secret or anything like that. In this, we follow Misery, who is a vampire, and she agrees to an arranged marriage between herself, a vampire, and the werewolf Alpha to create peace between the two territories. She also kind of have ulterior motives to this because her adoptive sister slash best friend has gone missing, and she believes that she might be able to find her in the werewolf territory, and she's not allowed to go there otherwise. So this is the perfect plan. She ends up having to go live in the werewolf Alpha's house, whose name is Lo, and she just feels very out of place, and because she's just surrounded by werewolves and they all see her as the enemy. But she is the most funny, sarcastic, just amazing main character. I loved every second of reading this book because of her. Like, everything she said that came out of her mouth just had me smiling and laughing. Like, it was just so funny because she's like so sarcastic and dry, and the way she says it, I just imagine everything coming out in like this monotone voice, and it made it perfect. It was amazing and I absolutely love it. I recommend Bride for sure. In this, you don't have to like learn all these like magic systems or crazy words or a whole other world. You still get to be in like the human world that you know. There's just vampires and werewolves. The next is a YA, like I said, young adult, and it's called Renegades, and it is a trilogy. And I read this years ago, but I feel like it could be pretty good to get into fantasy because it's definitely very fun and maybe a little bit more like Marvel or something, because it is kind of superheroes in a way. Not entirely, but kind of. So in this world, there's the so-called renegades, which is this group of like prodigies who have supernatural abilities. And our main character, Nova, is seeking vengeance against these. She doesn't actually like the renegades because of something they've done to her or her family. And she herself also has like powers. I think she doesn't sleep and she can put others to sleep, as far as I remember. And she ends up meeting Adrian, who's the son of two of the prodigies, like the renegades. And they spark a friendship and whatnot. And he has no idea that she's like this villain kind of that people know about, who puts people to sleep. So she kind of has a secret identity and all that. And she gets invited into the renegades because of this and can kind of work even better there for the resistance. Very interesting. I remember really, really liking this series. It's just easy to get through. And the superhero aspect of it is really fun, and I like the characters and the side characters in the story as well. Like, there's a little bit of a found family in a way. And again, if you're new to reading and you might not know all these words like found family, it's basically like, think of Friends, like the TV series Friends. They're a found family. They're friends who decide kind of to like have a family almost, like they spend Christmas, Thanksgiving, all these things, and they're always together. So they're kind of like your chosen family, I guess could be a better word for it. And the last fantasy I have is kind of a dystopian book, and it's called Silver Elite. It is about a world where the so-called modifiers are people who have psychic abilities, and that is punishable by death because they've been outlawed and they're no longer allowed to be there. One thing you'll really find if you start reading fantasy is that either it's a book where the people who have powers are the ones who are the elite, or it's the people who don't have powers who are the elite. Like in Powerless, like I talked about before, it's the people who have powers that are like the oppressor, and the oppressed is the ordinaries who don't have powers, whereas in this one it's the opposite, and it's the people who don't have powers who are the oppressor. Very common theme in fantasy books. Our main character in this book is called Ren, and she is obviously a modifier, and she has these powers, and she's kind of in hiding, but something happens in her life and she goes out of hiding, and she ends up being forced to get into the Silver Block, which is like this elite training program that she now has to be a part of. But it does get her some inside knowledge that she can help with the rebels or like the resistance to bring down the Silver Elite. Very interesting, and the second one comes out either in April or in May, I don't remember, but I'm so excited to read what happens after the first one ended. The last genre, what the hell? Why can I talk? Oh my god, why does it sound wrong? The last genre is literary fiction. It's kind of a mix between literary fiction, one historical fiction, and also a memoir, but I just didn't know what else to call the overall genre. The first book in this genre is My Friends by Frederick Bachman, and Frederick Bachman is one of my favorite authors, especially for literary fiction. He is phenomenal, like he writes so beautifully. I'm actually reading a book by him right now called A Man Named Ove, which is also a movie or TV series, I believe. But anywho, let me talk about My Friends. In this book, we follow Louisa, who is in foster care, but she recently just turned 18. Actually, I think the book starts on her 18th birthday. She decides to run away from her foster family, and she goes to this art exhibition because she's really obsessed with this postcard that has a painting of it, of these three kids sitting on like the pier on a summer day. And she's always been obsessed with these three kids, and like envisioned herself being there in that town and having those three kids as her friends. And she's just like really gotten so obsessed with it because she's moved around so a lot from like foster home to foster home, but this one postcard has always like been with her, and she's just so fond of it. And she ends up actually meeting the artist who did the painting, and he unfortunately dies very early on in the book, so it's not a spoiler, don't worry. She inherits this painting from it, which the artist's best friend cannot understand why he would ever do that, and Louisa doesn't know what to do with this painting. It's worth millions of dollars. So she basically follows the artist's best friend because he's going back to that town, and he's actually one of the kids on that painting, just older now. He's in his 40s, and they were like 15, 16 years old in that picture, or maybe 14, I actually don't remember. But they spark an adventure together, and she's pestering him with questions, and she wants to hear the story of these kids on this painting. So it's kind of like dual timelines, dual stories in a way, because we see the present tense of Louisa and Ted. Okay, his name is Ted, and they get on this train and they're going back to the town where that painting has actually been made, because that's where he's from and that's where he lived. And then the other story we're seeing is him like telling the story, but we're seeing it kind of in the present tense in a way, from like 25 years earlier, when of that summer, or those summers where those kids were together. They all have like familial issues and self-esteem issues and all these things that brings them together, and every day they just hang out and they have the most perfect summer together. And he's painting that summer as well, and it's just such a beautiful story about friendship, about art, about grief, and he just writes in the most perfect way ever. And I cried at the end. It was just so good. So if you're into that instead of like a romance or fantasy or something, I would definitely recommend to check out Frederick Bachman. And if you want like more books by him, you could definitely read his trilogy called Beartown, also phenomenal. The next literary fiction book is The Favorites, which is about two figure skaters called Katharina and Heath, and they're actually childhood sweethearts, and they become like champion ice dancers. But one day they all of a sudden just stop being partners, and the whole world is wondering why, like what happened. And then 10 years after that, a documentary comes out where they've interviewed like her closest friends and people who were there at the time, people who she knew when she was an ice skater. So the book is kind of told, like, I can't remember if it's the beginning of each chapter or the end, but there's like it's written kind of like a script almost, like someone is saying something and someone else saying something, and it's always just so funny because then it'd be like, what do you think about this? And someone will say, I loved it, and the next one, I hated it, and it just makes it so just like fun and feels like it's real people who's telling the story about these two figure dancers. It's a really popular book and really just an interesting and easy way to get through something because of those like interview style, and just again makes it feel like it's real people. So would definitely recommend that book as well. Next up we have The Correspondent, which is a very like interesting and definitely special book that isn't really like any other book that I've at least read, because we follow this old woman named Sybil, and she's in her 70s. And the reason why this book is so interesting and unique is because the whole book doesn't have any dialogue or like any scenes really. The whole book is like 250 pages, I believe, and it's written purely from correspondence between Sybil and friends, family, strangers, just like anyone that she texts with or writes with. It's through emails, text messages, through letters. She just loves to write. Like, it's something that she does for hours. She'll sit down at her desk and she'll respond to everyone who has responded to her, and that's kind of how you follow the story. It's throughout years, and you see like at the top of a message it'll say what day and year it was that she wrote this. You see what she writes and you see what everyone who writes to her writes back. It was just so interesting, and it's so easy to get through because, again, like if it's an email, it sometimes is like this long and then you can get to the next page, so it moves very fast. And I think it spans like 10 to 15 years or something, and it was just so good. Sybil has been adopted, so it's about that, like what it's like to have been adopted and to wonder about your biological like family. And it's also about grief and losing a child, and it's about motherhood and how hard it can be to connect with your children in an older age. I loved this book so much. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I was obsessed, and I've recommended it to so many people as well. The next one is a historical fiction, and it is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, and this was another 5-star, and I actually read this right after The Correspondent, so I have 2 5-star rates in a row, which is very rare. I've only had 1 the whole year so far, and we're almost 3 months in. But The Nightingale is about 2 sisters during World War II in France, when Germany infiltrates France, and a German soldier actually ends up moving into their house and like is living there. And one of the sisters has a child, and her husband has gone off to become a soldier in the war because like every man basically had to go, and she has no idea when he's coming back. So this German soldier is living in their house instead, and it's just like so uncomfortable, and I can't even imagine, like these people have literally infiltrated your house, your home, and he's the enemy, and you just like have to cook him meals and whatnot. But I thought this book was just so interesting because you get a whole other perspective. Like, yes, it is fiction, but it's still so real and something that could definitely have happened and probably has happened to people. So you just get this whole like other perspective about the war and what it was like for women to be in this place. Because in history books, we mostly focus on like the men and the soldiers and the front lines, but we forget about all the women who were back home and also going through these things, about standing in lines for hours to get like even just a scrap of food, and there was no heating, so they were like freezing and they were starving and being so scared. And these women also fighting against the German soldiers in their own way. And it was just so interesting to see like the way that they became a part of the resistance, and they have to keep it so secret. And I really enjoyed this book, and I definitely recommend Kristen Hanna's historical books in general. I just read The Women recently. I have it in a reading log actually, and also phenomenal book about the Vietnam War and women's side in history in that as well. The very last book I have to talk about for this video is a memoir. It's called I'm Glad My Mom Died by Schmidt. And if you don't know who Schmidt is, she is the one who played Sam in the very popular Nickelodeon TV show called iCarly. She wrote a memoir a few years back where she talks about all the abuse that she went through with her mom and why she was even an actress in the first place, which was to be the breadwinner of her family. And she didn't even like acting. She was forced to do it, and she was forced into an eating disorder by her mom. Her mom was horrible to her. So much just mental and also physical abuse in the not eating and having to stay small so that she could get kid roles. And it was just so horrible to read about, but also so interesting, and how that affected her so many years down the road. And then she's saying she's glad her mom died because now she could finally get out of this abuse and her mom died from cancer. So definitely worth the read. It's also dirt. And if you don't want to read it, you can definitely also listen to the audiobook. I know it's available on Spotify, and it is actually Schmidt herself who narrates the audiobook. Definitely would recommend. Such a good memoir and so well written. But those were all the books that I wanted to talk about for this video. I hope you got some recommendations or some ideas to what you could read. Even if it's not specifically these books, maybe you know like what genre or where to look after hearing about these books. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in my next video.